I am 76 years old now, and some mornings I wake up already tired, not in my bones, but in my heart. Because the first thing I feel is the absence of my son. And it's been 9 years since he died, but it still feels like I just missed him by a few minutes. Like if I'd walked into the room sooner or picked up the phone quicker, he might still be here. And that feeling has never loosened its grip on me. When people talk about time like it's something you spend, I want to tell them it's something that slips out of your hands while you're busy thinking you'll catch it later. 'Cause that's what I did with my boy. I kept thinking there would be more days, more weekends, more chances to sit down and really listen to him, and I was wrong. I was 30 when he was born, young enough to think I had all the energy in the world and old enough to believe I knew what mattered. I worked at the plant back then, 12-hour shifts, sometimes 6 days a week, because I had this idea in my head that a good father was a man who kept food on the table and shoes on his children's feet. I remember holding him the first night in the hospital, how small he felt, how his fingers wrapped around my thumb like he was afraid I'd drift away. And I whispered to him that I'd take care of him, that I'd give him a good life, and I meant it with every part of me. I just didn't understand yet that taking care of someone isn't only about providing, it's about being there. When he was little, he used to wait by the door when I came home. I'd pull into the driveway and see his face pressed against the glass, his hair always sticking up in some strange way, and he'd burst out the door yelling, "Dad!" like I'd been gone for years instead of a single day. Those moments were bright like sunlight, but I treated them like they were endless, like I could set them aside and come back whenever I wanted. I'd scoop him up, smell the soap on his skin, listen to him talk about school or a bug he'd found, but half my mind was already drifting to dinner, or the couch, or the bills I had to pay. As he grew older, he started asking me to play catch in the yard. I'd say tomorrow, buddy, because my legs hurt or my back was stiff or I was just tired. Tomorrow became next week, and next week became someday. He'd ask me to come to his school events, his little plays and games, and I went sometimes, enough to tell myself I was a present father, but I missed more than I went to. I always had a reason. Overtime at work, a headache, something that seemed important in the moment and meaningless now. There was this one afternoon I remember clear as day. He was maybe 10 or 11. He came into the living room holding a baseball glove that was too big for his hands and asked if I'd throw the ball with him before dinner. I was sitting in my chair, newspaper in my lap, feeling worn down from the shift. I didn't even look up. I just said, "Not now, son. Maybe later." He stood there for a second, longer than usual, like he was hoping I'd change my mind, then quietly said okay and walked away. I heard the back door close. That sound still lives in my chest. I never did go out there that day. Later never came. At the time, I told myself he understood. Kids understand, right? They know their parents are busy. They know work is hard. But what I didn't see was that every time I chose something else over him, I was teaching him he came second. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't mean. I loved him. But love that isn't shown starts to feel like it isn't there. When he became a teenager, things changed. He stopped waiting by the door. He stopped asking me to play catch. He spent more time in his room or with friends. I told myself that was just part of growing up. Boys become men, they pull away, that's normal. But I also felt this distance growing between us, like a quiet wall neither of us talked about. We still spoke, still lived in the same house, but something warm had cooled. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me like he wanted to say something. I'd ask what was wrong, and he'd shrug and say nothing. I believed him because it was easier than pushing. Looking back, I think he was waiting for me to ask differently, to sit down, to really listen, the way I never quite had. I remember the night he graduated high school. Everyone was celebrating, taking pictures, laughing. His mother was crying happy tears. I put my arm around him and told him I was proud. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes, something soft and sad at the same time. Later that night, after most people had gone home, he sat next to me on the porch. The air was warm, full of summer sounds. He said, "Dad, do you think we could hang out more now that school's over?" I laughed a little and said something like, "Sure, we'll have plenty of time now." I thought life was finally slowing down. I thought I'd get around to being the father I always meant to be. He moved out 2 years later. Got a small apartment across town, started working, started building his own life. We saw each other on holidays, sometimes Sundays. We talked on the phone every couple of weeks. Each time we spoke, I told myself I should call more, visit more, but days slipped by. I kept thinking, next week, next month, when things calm down. But things never really calm down, do they? There's always something. The last real conversation we had was about a year before he died. He called me one evening, his voice tired. He said work had been rough, that he felt stuck, like he didn't know where his life was going. I listened, but not the way I should have. I gave him advice, quick answers, the kind you give when you're half watching television. I told him everyone feels that way sometimes, that he'd figure it out. I didn't ask how deep the heaviness went. I didn't ask if he was okay. I didn't say I was there for him. We hung up and I went back to my show. A week later, he left a voicemail while I was at work. He said, "Hey Dad, just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you get a chance." I listened to it that evening. I was tired. I thought I'd call him the next day. I didn't. 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. 2 police officers standing there, hats in their hands. Eyes soft in that way you recognize instantly, even if you've never seen it before. Before they said a word, my heart already knew. My son had been in a car accident on his way home from work. A drunk driver ran a red light. He died before the ambulance got there. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. I don't remember falling to my knees, but my wife said I did. Everything after that feels like a blur of hospital lights, family voices, funeral flowers, and this constant roaring in my ears like the world had broken open. At the funeral, I stood in front of his casket and looked at his face. So still, so peaceful, and all I could think was how much I had planned to do later. All the conversations I thought we'd have when we had more time. All the games we'd play when work slowed down. All the love I thought I'd show when life wasn't so busy. And suddenly there was no later. His phone was returned to us a few days after. I went through it slowly, carefully, like it was made of glass. There were pictures of us from when he was little, me holding him at the zoo, US fishing once when he was about 8, one of the few times I'd taken the day off. There were also messages he'd never sent, notes he'd written. One of them said, "I wish Dad would talk to me more. I think he loves me, but sometimes I feel like I'm not important." I sat on the bed and cried like a child. That sentence has followed me for 9 years. I replay my life in small moments now. The times he asked me to play and I said later. The nights he wanted to talk and I was too tired. The voicemail I never returned. None of them felt huge at the time. That's the cruel part. Regret isn't built in one big mistake. It's built in thousands of tiny choices you think don't matter. People tell me I was a good father, that I provided, that I did my best. Maybe that's true in some ways. But I also know I missed the heart of what he needed. He didn't need more money. He needed more me. I talk to him now when I sit alone in the evenings. I tell him about the garden, about his mother, about the neighbors. I tell him I'm sorry. I tell him I wish I'd listened better, loved louder, showed up sooner. Sometimes I imagine him sitting across from me, older now, maybe with kids of his own, and I wonder what kind of grandfather I would have been. The house is quiet these days. Too quiet. His room is still there, mostly the same. I couldn't bring myself to change it much. His jacket still hangs by the door. Every once in a while I catch his scent on it, faint now, and it feels like he's just stepped outside. What I've learned in these 76 years is that time is not kind. It doesn't warn you when it's about to run out. It doesn't slow down when you finally realize what matters. It just keeps moving, taking chances with it. If I could go back, I wouldn't work so much overtime. I wouldn't sit in that chair when my son stood there with a baseball glove. I wouldn't brush off those tired phone calls. I'd sit on the porch longer. I'd listen deeper. I'd tell him I loved him every chance I got, not just when it felt like a big moment. But I can't go back. All I can do is live with the wisdom that came from the pain and hope someone else hears it before it's too late for them. Because love doesn't wait. Childhood doesn't wait. People don't wait. And one day, without asking your permission, time takes what you thought you still had. I thought I had more time with my son. I was wrong.